In this video, we're going to take a simple approach to playing the 2-5-1 chord progression on the piano to help us achieve a more lo-fi hip-hop aesthetic with our music. If you're not familiar with the 2-5-1 progression, the whole reason why we're using numbers to describe this chord progression is because it's really all related to the major scale, which has 7 notes, and from those 7 notes you can create 7 chords. Hence, 2-5-1 would be referring to the 2nd, 5th, and 1st note of the scale created as a chord. For instance, let's look at C major. And then of course after the 7th note is C again, and the scale just repeats itself going up to a higher pitch range. So if I take each note from that chord and create instead a triad, stacking 2 more intervals to the right, I now have a full chord, in this case C major. In the key of C major, the first chord would be C major. If I continued up with that same shape, I have a D minor. And you can continue doing this, and it's pretty easy to play in the key of C major because it's all natural notes. There's no sharps or flats, in other words, black keys used on the piano. So it's very easy to move these shapes up and down in a horizontal fashion. I'm doing this with my left hand, and the fingering that you use is all dependent on what's comfortable for your hand. In this case, I have pinky, middle, index. And what I'll probably do now is take my thumb on my left hand and add on another tone. This is an extension, in this case the 7th interval, and this allows me to play 7th chords built around the scale. Here I'm just descending in C major in 7th chords. This is very important to learn how to do, playing 4 notes at a time with your left hand. If we're in the key of C major, the 2 would be D, and we'll create our D minor 7 chord out of that shape. We'll go to the 5 chord, which is G dominant 7, and then the 1 chord, obviously, C major 7. But look what happens when we use this voicing that we have so far. It's very simple to understand and play, but there's quite a jump from 2 to 5. Look at that. I'm jumping up 4 keys to get there. It's not very ideal. So what we're going to do is lead ourselves into a more easy voicing to play. So it's actually pretty easy to do. I'm going to keep these 2 fingers planted, in this case my pinky and my middle finger, and these 2 fingers are going to move down to the G and the B. And if you look below, you can see it's still playing a G7 chord. It's just stacking the tones differently. We would call this a different kind of voicing. In this case, maybe an inversion of a G7 chord, but a G7 chord nonetheless. And it's very easy to then go to the 1 chord. I can keep these other fingers now planted and move these fingers instead down a key, and look at that. We're at C major 7. So just like that, I have a 2-5-1 progression in my left hand using some nice voice leading in the chords. Now with the right hand, we're going to use a thing called octaves. Octaves is literally using a doubling of the note. I know it's kind of cut off on the right side of the screen, but that's a C up there. And this is a really neat trick because what people do when they're playing melodies with the right hand is they stack the tones to create a little more depth of the melody and help it cut through as well. And what you see I'm doing is improvising melodies with the right hand. But before you get to that step, all you really have to do is just play a scale with the right hand using octaves. And then once you get comfortable doing that, try it with the chord progression in the left hand. So maybe we'll go. And then before we go to G, let's switch to G7. And then before we go to C major 7, let's go to D. So again, one more time, nice and slow. Feel free to pause or back up the video to do this together. And one more time. You can ascend up the scale. You can start skipping notes, One typical thing I do to help people learn how to improvise is I just take a couple of notes, a small cluster of notes in the C major scale. Let's say we take G, A, and C, and just use those 3 notes to improvise over the chord progression that I'm also focusing on in the left hand. And the more times you play this chord progression, the more automatic, the more muscle memory you'll have, the easier it will be to improvise your own melodies and start using these ideas. I couldn't help it, I had to go to E there. But you can see how you can improvise with it. And of course, it goes without saying, you can take this whole idea, apply it to other chord progressions using the same philosophy, the same approach. Left hand is using 4-note chords with some voice leading so that you can focus on the right hand playing octaves in melodies that can move around in different kinds of stepwise or jumping movements and just, create interesting melodies. If you found this video useful, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe. We do more piano tutorials on this channel. I actually have a tutorial using a different example of the 2-5-1 you can check out there. And if you're just a music producer that's trying to learn how to play piano, maybe you're beginner, intermediate, you just want to use some material to add to your productions, I have a free product, a link is in the description, to a Midi library that uses some really creative other forms of lo-fi hip-hop piano. I hope you all found this video useful in some kind of way, and I'll see you next time. Take care.